is Ascension Sunday. Probably not a date you have circled on your calendar. I heard a pastor say this week that we have ascension deficit disorder. It is the day when we remember Christ's ascension following his resurrection. The ascension marks the end of Jesus' earthly experience and the beginning of the role of Jesus as advocate and intercessor at God's side. The ascension of Christ was so important to our ancient forebears that they made it part of the earliest Christian statement of belief. The Apostles' Creed says this: "On the third day he rose from the dead, he ascended into heaven, and sitteth at the right hand of God." The ascension has also been portrayed in all kinds of art, all kinds of paintings, stained glass windows, and these depictions usually show Jesus drifting upward into the clouds in flowing white robes with awe-filled disciples gazing upward in amazement or confusion. Today, if we were to do a piece of art, it might be more like a scene for a new movie directed by Steven Spielberg or the like. It might be one of the superheroes who is clearly out of this world. To our 21st century minds, it may be tempting to dismiss the record of one ascending into the abyss of space, as if God somehow dwells out there beyond the vast astronomical expanse. Really, we're not alone in our thinking or our curiosity. Those disciples that were with Jesus had a tough time comprehending all that was happening with them and feeling so many different feelings and watching Jesus and now having to try to figure out their new life as Christian followers. People all throughout history have been challenged to know how to follow the teachings and example of Jesus. And we're no different. So in his usual way, Jesus acknowledges our need and prays for us. In our scripture passage that Peggy read for you today, Jesus is praying for all of his disciples all throughout time. And that includes us. In his prayer, Jesus is speaking his most urgent hope for all of us disciples. Jesus focuses on what matters most from his entire ministry. Can you imagine trying to think about your whole life, your whole career, everything you have done in school and work, in ministry and outreach and church, and put it together in one prayer? Jesus is communicating with us today from the center of his life and hopes. Jesus speaks knowing that the Spirit who abides within each of us is able to keep his message alive in our hearts. What is central among Jesus' concerns? For him, the culmination of his work is that we know God. That we know God through Jesus' life and ministry. So let's think for just a minute about what some of those teachings and examples are. Think about how earthy Jesus was, how really down to earth, how he was really willing to be anywhere, anytime, for anyone. And think about his affection and love for children and how important they were to him. And then there were his tears and his compassion for all kinds of people in all kinds of need. And we even saw Jesus get angry. There was his fury with hypocrisy and what we might call dishonest pride. And then there was that amazing patience with all of us who are so slow sometimes to learn about the power of love. These are just some of the examples that we have from Jesus. And so Jesus' final hopes are not a celebration of himself, but they are the recognition that his life and ministry are windows into God's love and God's vision and purpose for us. So Jesus prays for us. And Jesus prays that people will come to know God through him. Think about that simple phrase, to know God. This kind of knowing describes a powerful, active, sometimes confessional, and intimately relational claim on our lives. Knowing God is an experience that draws us as believers sometimes into a new reality. A reality in which a new order will be shaped by God's vision for love and justice and service through our relationships and our community. Knowing God will be evident through our love in our life right now. So how do we make Jesus' prayer our own prayer? That we might know God in ever new and real ways. St. Augustine said this, that Christ departed from our eyes so that we should return to our own hearts and find him there. Perhaps that's a new way for us to think about how we live out of this world. Now, I'm not talking about our physical location. It is so easy for us to get so consumed by everything in our lives. Our work, our activities, our sports, our camps, our leisure, our church, our family life. The list goes on and on and on. That's our world stuff. Those are the choices for how we spend our time. And each of them are important. And each has a very special place in our lives. It is also important sometimes to get away from all of that, both physically and mentally, to attend to our spirit. In honor of Maya Angelou, a poet and author who died this week, I want to share a short writing of hers about getting away to change our focus. This is what she has to say. Every person needs to take one day away, a day in which one consciously separates the past from the future. Jobs, family, employers, and friends can exist one day without any one of us. And if our ego permits us to confess, they could exist eternally in our absence. Each person deserves a day away in which no problems are confronted, no solutions searched for. Each of us needs to withdraw from the cares which will not withdraw from us. We need hours of aimless wandering or periods of time sitting on park benches, observing the mysterious world of ants and the canopy of treetops. If we step away for a time, we are not, as many may think and some will accuse, being irresponsible. But rather we are preparing ourselves to more ably perform our duties and discharge our obligations. When I return home, I am always surprised to find some questions I sought to evade had become answered, and some entanglements I had hoped to flee had become unraveled in my absence. A day away acts as a spring tonic. It can dispel rancor, transform indecision, and renew the spirit. Jesus is inviting us on this Ascension Sunday to spend some time out of this world of ours, to spend some heart time, to remember what matters most to us, to give thanks for the love of God through Jesus, who reaches out and accepts and loves us no matter what, to center ourselves in our faith, to grow in our relationship with God, to know God through prayer. When those early disciples found themselves at this place when Jesus ascended from them, they prayed for the coming Spirit of God so that they could be empowered to be Jesus' witnesses in the world. Their prayer follows the promise from Jesus that he will send the Spirit to be with us. That's the story for next week when we celebrate Pentecost, the day when we all come wearing red. But that's next week. For now, let's prepare for that gift this week. I invite each and every one of us to intentionally take time this week to receive Jesus' prayer for you. Take your bulletin home with you and read the prayer in our scripture. Read it often. Allow yourself to get out of this world for a time. Give yourself the quiet and the focus so that we may return to our own heart and find Jesus there. Listen to what Jesus is calling you to do and be this week, that we may all be his witnesses in the world. Thanks be to God. Amen.